Today we are discussing the great psychologist, philosopher, essayist, and intellectual William James. And we're focusing on his essay, The Will to Believe, and the book that has that title, The Will to Believe, and Essays in Popular Philosophy, that was published, I believe, at the very beginning of 1897. Jonathan, hello.
Hello, James.
So, who was William James?
Well, I would like to start by saying that William James is probably my special desert island philosopher. I mean, of all the philosophical writers, and he's an original and innovative kind of writer, a stylist, but he's a writer that anyone can read with pleasure. I mean, he's never difficult.
Yes.
And in a way that is to do with his theme, which is his great philosophical theme is that no one should be vain intellectually. No one should be intellectually conceited. No one should take themselves too seriously as an intellectual and his main topic is always his own bafflement about things. And he's inviting other people to share his bafflement. And he only gets really cross with people when they refuse to admit that there's any reason to feel baffled. So I think he's of all the wonderful philosophers we're discussing, I think he's probably the best company of them all. He's a very, yes. You feel you're in the hands of a friend, a not uncritical friend. But anyway, as we should go back, he got off to an extremely lucky start. He was born, I think you said, in 1842, and a year later, a brother was born to him, who is even more famous than him, namely Henry James, the novelist. And their parents were complete originals. His father was pretty rich. He was a gentleman who was able to pursue his hobbies, and one of his hobbies was to provide a fantastic education for his two eldest sons, William and Henry. First of all, in New York, and his idea was that the way to teach children was to let them do what they like. So they just ran around Manhattan without any control. Then he again and again took them to Europe, where to experience art and to go to museums and opera houses and to read poetry and novels, not only in English but in French and German as well, and to learn that the world is inexhaustibly interesting, and that the worst thing you could ever do is to imagine getting bored with it. So it was a fantastic childhood that he gave them.
Yeah, it should also just be said, I mean, in addition to all that tremendous emphasis on curiosity, in the case of those two brothers, an extremely useful grounding in languages. I mean, Henry obviously becomes so mind-bogglingly fluent in French that he astounded, I can't remember what French writer it was, he astounded a French friend by being able to turn the Cockney of one of Kipling's poems almost instantly into French equivalent. And in the case of William, an easy familiarity with French and German, which is really part, I think, of James's extremely wide reading in psychology and philosophy and politics and so on. But yes, that tremendous curiosity. The father was odd, though, wasn't he, intellectually? He seems to have moved through, I guess, as restless as he was as a parent, he sort of moves through, sort of some sort of Calvinism, Swedenborgianism, socialism, Sandemanianism. It's just sort of extraordinary stuff.
Yes, and always with not always with tremendous enthusiasm, because about a year after Henry was born, they were all in England, and he had a huge religious crisis. He started seeing spooks in the fireplace, and
yes.
And that's when he definitely turned his back on the very strict non-conformist Northern Ireland background of his very strict but extremely commercially successful father, and became deeply religious, but without any sort of theological discipline at all. I mean, he wrote about theology, but it was all sort of crazy, but with the most enlivening enthusiasm for every idea. I mean,
Right.
once he got through his depression, he was a great enthusiast. But another aspect of his enthusiasm and his love of providing a really, as he put it, a spontaneous education to William and Henry was that basically he spent all the money. He spent the kids' inheritance. And so they then were left having to make a living, which really their education hadn't prepared them for. And that's how, well, Henry made a great success of being a novelist. And William, I mean, I suppose on the face of it, less successfully had to get a job in a university in Harvard, and I think it was 1872, and he was just 30. And his first job was teaching physiology because he had decided, I mean, I guess probably in reaction against his father, that he wanted to be a scientist. And one thing that his father wasn't is a scientist. And Harvard gave him a fantastic opportunity to not just to teach what he wanted, but also to educate himself through teaching things. And he went from physiology to psychology, and it wasn't until he was in his 50s, really, it wasn't until the 1890s that he started writing directly about philosophy and really, well, I wouldn't say found his voice because he'd already had a very distinctive voice, but I think the James that we love and admire today really didn't come into existence until he was, quite advanced in years. And he spent 35 years as a very conscientious teacher in Harvard. He got a bit of time off, but he taught and taught and taught for 35 years. And when he resigned, I think he wished he'd resigned earlier because he thought that Harvard had changed. And he wrote very eloquently and angrily about what he called the PhD octopus.
Oh, yes.
That was beginning to grip the university, and it was no longer a place where,
Right.
he'd had this fantastic opportunity to keep reinventing himself as a student and as a teacher, and that had ceased. And there were these bald-pated young men who were droning on about their special subjects and didn't know anything about what connected them. So I think he ended up, he may be a hero in the annals of Harvard University, but he was also, by the end of his time there, extremely critical of how academic it had become.
Yes. One thing I would I'd add, just thinking about James's early life, is this extraordinary trip he made in 1865 as a young man. He actually left medical school at Harvard to do it, to Brazil, to the Amazon. He was very influenced by this extraordinarily sort of radiant, warm, charismatic Swiss immigrant, Louis Agasses, who was a professor of natural history and a pronounced anti-Darwinian. And Agasses said, we're going to go to Brazil, we're going to go up the Amazon, and I'm going to prove Darwin wrong. And we're going to do it by collecting enormous quantities of different species, insects and mammals and reptiles. And you, with a number of other volunteers, you, young William, will be responsible for preserving those animals. I mention it in part just because, to go back to the thing of Cambridge being imprinted, sort of almost at the heart of the university, is this still is the collection that Agasses built up. There's a beautiful, very old-fashioned natural history of the Museum of Natural History at Harvard. Years ago, when my dad, who was a zoologist, who taught zoology at Durham University, though also slightly complicatedly for me, decided to become a minister in his 50s, so was also a vicar, but taught zoology at Durham. My dad came over to Boston in 2017. Of course, I took him to this extraordinary history of natural I'm sorry, this Museum of Natural History, and he said it's terribly old-fashioned because it's full of taxidermy. It's full of stuffed and preserved specimens. Many of these had been brought back by Agasses and William James and the other volunteers from this trip. I mention it because thinking about this trip, which I actually knew very little about until I was reading biography of James, it struck me that we could think of it as central in two ways for what we're going to be discussing. One is that James learnt there the extraordinary importance of sort of empirical research. He quite quickly broke with Agasses and became a very engaged and interested reader of Darwin. But in a sense, it didn't matter what Agasses was trying to prove. It seems to me the crucial thing is just going out into the field in the way that we associate very much with James as a psychologist, say, going out into the field and coming back with a great deal of facts and being willing to let the facts speak for themselves. That seems tremendously important. One thing, and then secondly, this comes to the will to believe. It strikes me that this is a very good biographical example of something that he talks about in The Will to Believe, which is the forced and or momentous decision. The moment where someone says to you, are you coming with me to Brazil or are you not? And if you say no, or you sort of haver for, 2 or 3 days, too bad, the ship's gone. You'll have missed it. But if you're willing to commit yourself now to going to Brazil, you might have the most marvelous experience. And it just struck me that a lot could come out of that young man's decision to risk a lot. I mean, of course, in those days you risked your life by traveling 21 days by ship down to Rio de Janeiro.
Yes, indeed. He says somewhere that that it's terrible, the habit people have of postponing a decision until, as he puts it, some kind of bell will ring in their head to say, yes, this is absolutely certain. He said, if he'd done that, he would never have done anything because the bell has never rung in his head. The bell of certainty has never rung. And so
Right.
You always have to live your life and make your decisions under conditions of uncertainty. And that includes intellectual decisions. I think that's where he's most original as a philosopher. It's not just in life that you have to accept contingency, but also in matters of belief. And so The Will to Believe, well, it's a very clever title. He was very good at titles. The Will to Believe, because it's an allusion to Nietzsche. It's letting you know that he's read Nietzsche, but he's also going the opposite way to Nietzsche, because Nietzsche obviously was a militant atheist. And the point of The Will to Believe is that nobody can ever tell you not to be religious. If you have a feeling that religion is for you, then don't let anybody tell you. There is no proof of the existence of God. It's just a superstition. Because whatever you believe, and in fact, even if you're a scientist who believes in the uniformity of nature, that's a matter you take on faith. You don't know it. And so life is full, he says, of maybes. And that includes, what to some people, certainly to his father, was the biggest question of all. Do you accept religion? Do you accept Jesus or not? And he actually did. He says that he regretted this title, this jingling title, he called it, the Will to Believe. He said it got him into hot water because at one point he said he should have just called it The Right to Believe. And what he meant was that no one ever can forbid you to believe something that you're strongly inclined to believe. And if they say, well, science forbids it, you say, well, no, science doesn't. Science is equally a matter of will, a matter of faith. And Vernon Lee told him that she actually had a very strong will not to believe. And he said, that's fine. You go with that. And in a way, he was not. It can come across as though it's a defense of religion against science, but I think it's more double than it's kind of anti-religion. It's not so much pro-religion as anti-religion.
Thanks for listening to this extract from Close Readings. You can listen to the full episode and all our other Close Readings series by signing up to our Close Readings subscription. Go to lrb.me/audio or click on the link in the description.